Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to St Mary's Vicarage on this Thursday, the 5th of November, lockdown 2. Here we are again, and yesterday I was just looking back over some of the broadcasts, and the very first broadcast that I made when the first lockdown happened back in March. Though I say here we go again, we are in a very different place now than we were back in March. A lot more is known about this virus. There are much better treatments for this virus. It's understood a lot better. So though some of the restrictions are similar, the phrase stay at home, save lives, protects the NHS, that sort of still stands. Our schools, colleges and universities, of course, are still open. And though it's a sadness that we're not able to hold collective worship in church over the lockdown, though a simple act of remembrance will happen on Sunday, I am really pleased to say that our churches have not been locked. So apart from, obviously, St Andrew's Gussage, and the reason that remains locked is, as I've always said, we have to go across private land to access it, and it's such a small building that trying to maintain the social distancing that would be required in there would be very difficult. However, both St Mary's and St Rumbold's, St Mary's Handley and St Rumbold's Pentridge, are open for private prayer and reflection. In St Mary's, you can go in, you can light a candle if you wish, and there is a prayer board, and just observe the signs that are there. Use the hand wash, and either write your name down on the list or use the test and trace gizmo to sign yourself in using your phone. Likewise down at Pentridge. Now, I was thinking yesterday, I went for a bit of a walk yesterday afternoon. I normally find that helps me think and clears my head. And of course, I particularly feel for and want to pray for those who are once again separated from families, particularly those who are concerned about loved ones who are in care homes or any form of institutionalised care, and not being able to see them. And I'm also praying particularly for those whose livelihoods and jobs will be affected once again on this. It was really good news to hear that the government has extended the furlough scheme in the country to take into account this particular lockdown. But even so, many businesses, particularly those in the hospitality industry, were really on a knife edge, and this will tip some people sadly over the edge. Also, those people in the retail trade. Because unfortunately they're still going to have to, even though they've got furlough to pay staff and such like, they still have to pay their business rates and other taxes and such like. So it is a very, very difficult time. But it's good news that our schools are still open, and that young people's education is not going to be further affected. There was real problems in the summer. There was chaos, which was, I think, jointly owned by government and various institutions, and young people have really suffered as a result of that. And I know now that there's many young people, my own youngest son Benedict, who is applying to go to university next year. So there's many young people who are doing that, and they're not being able to do that in the normal way. Yes, they can fill out their UCAS forms and such like online, as students do these days, and all of that. But I remember when our eldest did this, of course, we did the sort of driving round to visit various universities, doing the tours, seeing the accommodation, meeting some of the other students and such like. And though some of that is done virtually, it's not quite the same. So it is a tough one for our young people. So I'm really thankful to our teachers and college and university staff for doing their best to keep unis and colleges and schools open. And of course, praying for our own school down here at Handley. So that's all, in a sense, good news. We also have learned, personally, have learned a lot more about the virus, and though it seems to have sunk into some people, it clearly hasn't sunk into others. But we know that even though we're in lockdown now, there's no need to go and panic buy, because our supermarkets will remain open. I popped into a supermarket on the way back from my walk yesterday, and it was very well stocked. I only needed to buy 1 or 2 bits and pieces. So we know we're still able to do that. And we can still go out and exercise. And it doesn't seem in the rules, as far as I can see, that any sort of regulations have been put on how far we can go to exercise, though of course a bit of common sense. So I think it's perfectly acceptable for those of us who live in Handley and Pentridge, if we want to get into a car and go somewhere to walk our dogs, which many people do. That seems to be acceptable, whereas before that was strongly discouraged and people weren't allowed to drive to exercise. So I think that in a sense is understood, providing when we're doing that, we're only doing that with our own particular family, our bubble, or on our own. So I think all of those things are positive and will be different from the first time round. However, the social element, of course, is really not there. And I did go down to the village tap last night for a sort of final pint before this lockdown. The folks there who organise the tap and work there, they work very hard to get it open again, to make sure we've got a provision in our village and community. And certainly in the summer months when we could sit outside, that was fantastic. And it's really good that they're trying hard to work at that. And I know they're thinking creatively about how maybe if restrictions are eased up towards Christmas, how that can be sensibly done, so that as a community we do have a place where we can gather in the way that's permitted and the rules allow. So it's not all bad news, folks, though it does affect us. So my diary, as you know, I have 2 jobs. I'm the vicar here, looking after these small parishes, and the other half of my job is as a rural field officer in Dorset. My diary was actually looking quite normal for November. I had quite a few meetings, and quite a few of those were not Zoom meetings. I was actually physically able to get out and about to meet other clergy, and we were looking at working with some PCCs and things like that. That was all starting to happen again. Of course, that has all stopped. And though some of those meetings that I do, I know can be transferred to Zoom, others won't work that way. So I sat and went through my diary yesterday. It's on computer, but sort of metaphorically with a pencil, just crossing stuff out, because I realised that those things aren't going to be possible. But that's not a huge problem. We will move forward and things will change. So how best can we use the time that's given to us in this particular month? Now, for some of us, things won't change at all. So, like, for example, my wife, she's a primary school teacher. She will be going into school and teaching, and her job will be much the same as normal, apart from all the restrictions that are in school. My youngest, who lives with us, he's still going to be able to go into college to do his studies and such like. And people who are physically having to go into work, if that's what their job says they need to do, then at one level things will not change. But for those who have had to come back to working at home, or have found themselves in a situation that they've been put on furlough and they can't do anything, then it's back to finding lots of jobs around the house, or things that they can do, or developing a bit of a hobby or something like that. And as I said the first time round, creativity, anything that's creative and artistic, is a really positive thing to do. It's really good for our mental health, as well as getting outside and having a walk. And you may not think you're particularly artistic, But I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think we've all got a creative streak in us. We might not necessarily going to be exhibiting something at the Tate, or cooking something that's going to appear in a 5-star Michelin restaurant. But there's so many things that we can do. We can, as people know, photography is my passion, and the extra free time I find myself with, I don't know, you probably can't see it, but behind me I have got a ever-growing pile of film that needs to be developed, so I'll do a few of those to keep my mind occupied. But there's lots of things we can do. We can cook, we can garden. My wife Kate really got into gardening over this year, this lockdown, and it's been a really good thing for her mental health. And even if you don't have a big garden, there's still lots of things that can be done. And I appreciate our garden centres have closed, but if you ask neighbours nicely who have gardens and things like that, send them a message. They might have a couple of spare pots or spare plants. I know we've got plenty stacked under the oil tank here out the back. They might have some seeds knocking about and things like that. So, you know, there's lots of things that that we can do. And all of that creative stuff, I think, is really important for our mental health. Of course, we've got Strictly on television, so what's to worry if you're into that? There's all of those sorts of things that are there. I'll tell you one of the things I've started rewatching. So Michael Palin, who I'm a big fan of, both as a Python and of his travel series, he's been doing a sort of retrospective documentary looking at all of his travels over the years, and it's a fascinating documentary. So it's all available on BBC iPlayer, and I always wanted to be a travel photographer. Travel is my passion, and eventually, if when I hang up my cassock, that is going to be what I am wanting to do, is to travel. As you know, I had an amazing trip a few years ago to Ethiopia, which was a real privilege for 3 weeks to photograph there and such like. But it's a great series. And then what I've decided to do, because the BBC, all of Michael Palin's exploits from pole to pole, full circle, the whole lot, they're all available there to watch. So once I've finished the retrospective, I've decided that over the next few months, as we get darker nights and it's all pretty miserable, and we didn't really get anywhere massively exciting this summer, I'm going to re-watch all of those Michael Palin things, because they're great. You know, watching a few of them, we get to see parts of the world that we might not go to. And what's fascinating, of course, is we're seeing the world how it was 20 years ago, and that's a very interesting thing too. And though there were dangerous places to be in 20 years ago, it does seem, from watching Palin's retrospective. Peter Goulston just said, garden centres remain open on a health basis. Well, that will absolutely delight Mrs. Vicarage. So I didn't realise that. I thought they had to shut. So garden centres still open, so you can get down there and buy some pots and things like that. Yeah, but as I was saying, the world does seem a far more divided and dangerous place than it did 20 years ago, or 20 plus years ago. And it's very interesting when you watch the Michael Palin documentaries that there's a point in time where everything changes in the world, and that point in time seems to focus very much on the invasion of Kuwait, the first Gulf War, and then the 9/11 Twin Towers thing, and all of that combined massively destabilized the Middle East, African areas and everything. And in a sense, it's interesting and also quite frightening that the incidents we've heard about in France and now Austria, and things that have also happened over the year, the fact that we're on an additional high alert level, you can trace all of that back to actions that happened then, and it is worrying, really. the divisions that we see in our world. And wouldn't it be great if we could just celebrate the diversity that is in our world, if we could celebrate the diversity of cultures, the diversity of religions, the diversity of thought, and respect each other's particular positions. Rather, we've moved to a position where the West thinks its way of living and being is the best and everybody should be like us. Then you have sort of fundamentalist religious groups, both Christian and Muslim and others, who think that their particular way of life is the way that people should live and everybody should live like that, and so on and so forth. Maybe I've watched too much Star Trek in my lifetime, but of course Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, his vision, in a sense, a bit utopian, was this idea of a celebration of diversity and cultures, and allowing people to live in the particular ways that they want to live. And it's an interesting thing now, because the pendulum has swung really over to the other way now, where everybody is in a sense expected to be pigeonholed. You're expected to be pigeonholed by your sexuality, by your ethnicity, by the colour of your skin. And though those things are important, they're not the only things that define us. They're not the only things that make us human. Being black is not the only thing, or being white is not the only thing. Being gay is not the only thing. We're far more complex beings than that. We're far more multifaceted than that. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And one of the wonderful things I love about the Michael Palin series is Michael has this innate ability to get alongside people. I think maybe it's his humour, it's his gentleness. And in his conversations with people of vastly different backgrounds and cultures to his own, you suddenly see the common ground of our shared humanity, in the fact that what we worry about is our daily lives, those we love, how we're going to be fed and sheltered, how we're going to celebrate life, and how we together support each other in those crises of life. That's our shared common humanity. And until as a people, a nation, a world, we can embrace and understand that shared common humanity that we all have, those real grassroots things that are important to the human existence, then unfortunately the wars and the division and the hatred will continue. And sadly, we're about to see, beginning to see that played out once again in the US elections, as we move to in a sense, a conclusion of that, and we see American democracy being made a bit of a sham, really, and it's very sad. It's odd to see an American president, that huge line of presidents that there has been, behaving in very similar ways to political leaders across the world who run totalitarian states, who refuse to accept that maybe their time has come. But there we go. We shall see and pray for the American people. So, folks, at least we are blessed today on this first day of lockdown with glorious sunshine. Mrs. Vicarage went for a run this morning. I didn't join her because it's undignified for members of the clergy to run unless absolutely necessary, though I do believe in walking a lot. So we do have a glorious day today, and let's hope and pray that we have a lovely, mild, autumnal November. So though we're in lockdown, it means that we can enjoy the beauty that's around us. So I'll stop rambling on. Of course, today is also the 5th of November. So all our glorious firework displays, of course, have been cancelled. We would have had the fantastic Scouts display here which had to be cancelled, but that hasn't happened. And I know lots of people might be going to do their own sort of displays at home and everything like that. Please be safe. Please think about those who live around you and your neighbours, particularly if they have pets and animals, so that in a sense maybe we can enjoy the 5th of November at home, but without causing distress and concern to those who live around us. Right, so the reading for today, Thursday, is from Luke 15 verses 1 to 10. The tax collectors and the sinners were all seeking the company of Jesus to hear what he had to say, and the Pharisees and the scribes complained, "This man," they said, "welcomes sinners and eats with them." So they spoke this parable to them. "What man among you with 100 sheep, losing one, would not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the missing one till he found it? And when he found it, would he not joyfully take it on his shoulders, and then when he had gone home call together his friends and neighbours? 'Rejoice with me,' he would say, 'I have found my sheep that was lost.' In the same way I tell you, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one repentant sinner than over 99 virtuous men who have no need of repentance. Or again, what woman with 10 drachmas would not, if she lost one, light a lamp and sweep out the house and search thoroughly till she had found it? And then when she had found it, call together her friends and neighbours. 'Rejoice with me,' she would say, 'I have found the drachma I lost.' In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing among the angels of God over one repentant sinner." And there at the beginning of that passage, of course, we just see highlighted what I was saying about the need for a more shared common humanity, rather than this, what we see very polarised today, which is I'm right, you're wrong. And here we see the Pharisees criticising Jesus for hanging around with people that they believe don't measure up, okay, by their particular standards. And Jesus pays no heed to this, because he does understand the essence of common humanity, because he sees all people as God's children. So here we see this. And then we get this very interesting parable, which I've spoken about before. Luke does this thing called a Lucan sandwich. So when you get parables, you get these two parables together, with one which normally involves a male, a man, another a woman. So here you get the lost sheep and the lost coin. The lost sheep one is very interesting, because there's a lot of commentary and discussion about this, particularly on this phrase where Jesus says, "What man among you with 100 sheep, losing one, would not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the missing one till he had found it?" Well, the thinking is that most shepherds then, if you had 100 sheep, that's a lot of sheep. And if you had lost one, you would not leave 99 in the wilderness just to go and find one sheep. Because the potential would be that by the time you have found your one sheep, you would come back and maybe find that 5 sheep had been killed or injured. So you would just ignore the one sheep and, in a sense, count your losses. But of course, the image of the shepherd is God, or Jesus. And here Jesus is wanting to stress that in God's eyes, everybody is important and is worthy of God's time and love and mercy and efforts to bring that person back into the sheepfold. So it's a very beautiful passage. It doesn't quite work as well with the lost coin, because sweeping a house, yes, you probably would do that until you'd found the lost coin. But a beautiful passage in a sense of showing us this love and mercy and care for God, that he wants to bring all of us in, and that God doesn't make lists. God doesn't make lists. And this, I have to say, is one of my continual frustrations and annoyances with the church, both the worldwide church and the Church of England, because we like to make lists in the church of who is in and who is out. So we have this list of people that the church deems acceptable, and then this list of that the church deems unacceptable. And that's not how God that's not how God thinks. And we fall into the trap at the end of that passage. If you remember, there's that wonderful phrase that says, Jesus says, you know, there'll be more joy in heaven over one sinner than repents than 99 righteous and virtuous people. There are no righteous and virtuous people. That is a myth. That is just our own arrogance, thinking that we are right, we are perfect, and everybody else is wrong. And Jesus is highlighting that. And if you understood Jewish theology of the time, those Pharisees would have understood what was being said there, because the only righteous person, the only righteous is God. Nobody else is righteous at all. And that's why you had the Jewish sacrificial system and everything like that. So it's very pointed at the Pharisees there, saying, you know, don't be so smug and arrogant to think that you are right and you are perfect, because you are not. And sadly, you know, my life in the church and in ministry, time and time again, I see fellow Christians and fellow colleagues who draw up lists. They draw up lists, and that's not how God sees people. We have to understand our common shared humanity and the fact that we're all made in God's image, and we need to follow the way that Christ behaved when he was alive. And he went out and he associated with people that his peers and others at the time had written a list. And there was an actual list basically saying these people are not acceptable. And that needs to change. But there we go. So that's our passage for today. Well, folks, looking ahead to Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, things are very fluid at the moment. The government advice has changed twice since it's come out. Sadly, we heard yesterday that because of the rules with regard to scouting, we're not going to be able to have any representation of the scout troops at the War Memorial. We will have some of the, in a sense, senior scout leaders will be there to represent the scouts. I'm hoping that we can display some of the scout banners. If any of you have a spare garden parasol stand, you know, one of those metal stands that you put your big garden umbrella in, or one of the ones you fill with water or sand, they would be quite useful, because we can put a few of them up round the back of the War Memorial, and hopefully we can put the banners and the standards of the various scout troops and the Union flag in that too, so they can be there for our act of remembrance. But it looks like that it will be just those key people who are involved, veterans, retired and active service personnel and their families here at the War Memorial. But I hope everybody else will take part at home. There will be an air raid siren. I hope. I've just contacted Paul Stiles about that. So listen out for the air raid siren at 11 o'clock. That will mark the beginning of the 2-minute silence, and then there'll be the all clear. And then hopefully you'll have a sheet that's going to be published on the both the village website, and it will also go out on our mailings as well. So do ask your neighbours and friends if they've got a copy of the sheet, and if they haven't and you're able to run off a copy, then please do so. I'm also going to print off copies and leave them at the back of the church. So if people want to come up and collect some copies from the church for themselves, or to give to a neighbour or friend, so we can all take part in remembrance this Sunday, that would be great. Right, I shall be quiet now, because I've gone on for nearly half an hour, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. But let's just finish with the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. God bless everyone. Take care.